The Mask of a Mother. In a quiet suburban neighborhood in the heart of the United States, there lived a hard-working single mother, Rosa Williams. She was a nurse at a local hospital, known for her kindness and quiet strength. She raised her young son, Elijah, on her own after her husband passed away in a tragic accident. Their lives were simple but filled with love, and Rosa worked tirelessly to provide Elijah with everything he needed. But the world outside their small bubble was far from peaceful. A violent gang known for its racist ideologies had been causing havoc in the area. They targeted black families, making their lives a living nightmare. The gang would harass, intimidate, and sometimes even commit worse acts to instill fear. For months, Rosa had been a target. They would leave cruel messages on her doorstep, throw eggs at her house, and one time, they even set her car on fire. Rosa never showed fear. She was determined to protect Elijah, no matter the cost. One night, the gang decided they had had enough. They planned a more direct confrontation, hoping to intimidate Rosa and force her into leaving the neighborhood. They broke into her house, armed with bats and knives, with their faces covered in masks. Rosa was caught off guard but quickly shielded Elijah, pulling him into a corner and begging them to stop. "Please, leave us alone," she cried, her voice trembling but full of desperation. The gang members taunted her, laughing at her fear, calling her names, and making racial slurs. They were ready to do what they had done to other families, break them down and leave them shattered. But then something unexpected happened. As the leader of the gang, a young man named Brad approached Rosa with a bat in hand. His eyes caught sight of a picture on the wall behind her, a photograph of Rosa's husband, who had been a police officer. The image of a proud, smiling couple with their young son, with a badge pinned to her husband's chest, stopped Brad in his tracks. Something in his face shifted. One of his gang members, who'd been lingering in the background, caught sight of the picture as well. "Is that your husband?" he asked, his voice shaky. Rosa, still protecting her son, nodded, her eyes full of sorrow. "He was a good man," she said, her voice soft but steady. "He believed in fairness, in equality. He served the people, no matter their race or background. He was a hero." Brad's grip on the bat loosened slightly as the weight of her words sank in. His eyes flicked to the other members of the gang, who seemed less confident now, their bravado crumbling. They hadn't anticipated this. They hadn't expected to see a family like theirs. The gang, made up of young men who grew up in a world of hate and prejudice, now faced the real cost of their actions. A sudden realization hit Brad like a punch to the gut. He had grown up in a town where racism ran deep, but his actions had never truly confronted the humanity of those they hurt. Rosa, despite being a victim of his gang's hatred, stood in front of him not as an enemy, but as a mother just like his own mother. Just like any other mother, simply trying to protect her child. As the gang stood in stunned silence, Brad dropped the bat. "We didn't know," he muttered, his voice breaking. The weight of his past actions crashed down on him in that moment, and for the first time, he truly saw Rosa not just as a black woman or a target, but as a human being. The other members of the gang slowly backed away, their anger replaced by confusion and guilt. Brad, now feeling like a coward in the face of his own conscience, turned and walked out of the house, his gang reluctantly following him. The tension in the room slowly dissipated as Rosa held Elijah tight. She wasn't sure what had just happened, but she knew one thing: the power of human connection, of seeing beyond skin color, beyond hatred, had broken through the walls that had been built around Brad and his gang. The next day, as Rosa and Elijah cleaned up the remnants of the gang's violence, there was a knock at the door. When Rosa opened it, she was shocked to see Brad standing there, his head hung low in shame. He didn't speak at first, but then he whispered, "I'm sorry. We're done. I'm done," and for the first time in a long while, Rosa allowed herself to hope. The world might still be filled with hate, but in that moment, she saw a glimmer of change, a possibility for healing, not just for her and her son, but for others who still lived in the shadow of prejudice. It wasn't a victory won by violence, but by humanity, by recognizing the truth behind the masks of fear and hatred that so often clouded people's judgment. And as Brad turned and walked away, Rosa knew that sometimes even the most hardened hearts could be softened, and even the deepest wounds could begin to heal.